So excited to be joined by today's guest, known to most of you as Jolly Olive, baseball content creator extraordinaire from Jomboy Media. Welcome to the walk-off, Jack. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you guys for having me. We've been trying to do this for a little bit, so I'm happy to finally be here.
Yeah, we had to work around you gallivanting off to the All-Star break. Pretty darn cool.
Yeah, it was a good time.
So to start with, dude, I did want to just mention I love your YouTube channel. I've been a fan for a couple years now. One of my favorite things that you manage to do is you just find this like the anomalies or the strengths in a player or situation that maybe hasn't been noticed. Like I loved your Terrence Gore video, buddy. Most Blue Jays fans obviously fell in love with your Raimel Tapia video, especially now that he has changed his launch angle and it is now producing. So great
Yeah,
stuff, man. Well done.
I appreciate it. I don't actually hear a lot of people talk about the Terrence Score video, so that makes me very happy. I was fully expecting a Rymel discussion today. I haven't checked in on him in a little bit, but it seems like he's doing okay.
He's been shockingly good since about mid-May.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Let's start with All-Star festivities, just because I'm super jealous and want to hear all about it. You go to LA, you take it all in. You're watching the drama of the home run derby, the ovations to the legend that is Albert Pujols. Buddy, that experience, it had to have been crazy. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I had never been to an All-Star game or home run derby, even when they were in New York and I was in town. So going to this, not only going, but going with a group of people as established as John Boy Media was very, very cool. A lot of fans instantly recognized us and came up and said hello and stuff. We obviously had the Pete Alonso home run ball go to Peter Moylan, which was a crazy clip. A really fun day. Chavez Ravine is a beautiful stadium with an absolutely unbelievable sound system. It was so loud in there, but so much fun. It was a great time.
Everyone cheering for Pujols had to have made your skin crawl a little bit. Like it was pretty cool to watch just the recognition this man was getting from the crowd.
Yeah, no, I was with them cheering for sure because you don't expect him to do well, but then he beat Schwarber, and
I
then
know.
that's the crowd's up in arms. It was a very very cool moment. I was happy for him.
I know the All-Star Games in Seattle next year, and we're both western side of Canada here. We're in Alberta, so I know that it's on my bucket list, and that's the closest it's been to me. So that's the dream, you know.
Yeah, we're going again next year. And when I
Oh,
found out
are
it
you
was in
nice?
Seattle, yeah, and Seattle's one of my favorite cities. It's one of the few places I've actually been on the West Coast. It's absolutely gorgeous in the Pacific Northwest. So like LA was a lot of fun, but I am not a Cali boy by any means. I'm very excited for Seattle.
Nice.
Seattle, I was at the Jays and Mariners series there in July, and it's such a whenever it's the Jays and the Mariners, it's such a like a unique experience because
Right.
everyone comes from Vancouver and just takes over the stadium. I mean, it was probably 50-50, but all the Canadians have the weekend off and are drinking heavy, so despite it being even crowd-wise, the Canadians were much louder. It was great. Yeah.
I always like the Blue Jays and Mariners color palette matchup. I feel like those
Yeah.
uniforms go well against each other.
So we are a very Blue Jays centric show here on the walk off, which
Yep.
does mean most of our focus winds up on the AL East. But it's hard not to look at the NL East and be super intrigued. I mean, you're Mets, buddy, having a great season. In fact, we could even take that great season and just say, especially after the Yankees lost yesterday and the Mets win, the best season so far.
Yeah. I mean, literally, no one's really gotten a huge injury aside from Scherzer's oblique. The pitching has really clicked. They play incredible
DeGrom's
defense.
back, and what a
Grom's
freaking
back. I mean, everything that can go right is going right for this team. And if you're a Mets fan, you're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop and being like, okay, like what's the catch? When are things going to start going to hell? And they just haven't. And they passed the Yankees last night. There's only one team in front of them now. That's the Dodgers. So hopefully we catch them too.
Do you feel like this division's wrapped up, or can you ever have that sort of confidence as a Mets fan?
Never, never. We've won one division in the past 16 years, and even that one felt a little fluky. Like I love my 2015 Mets, but they rode a little bit of magic there. So it never really feels like things are locked down until they're officially clinched.
Because the Braves are good.
They're very good.
So let's go back a week here. Trade deadline has come and gone. The dust has settled. I still can't wrap my head around Juan Soto is now a San Diego Padre.
Hit his first home run last night. It's crazy.
It's unreal, man, what the Padres did. Like, I can't even think of a team that has that heavily gone all in on a deadline, right? Like Josh Hader. Like, if
Yep.
they did everything they did without getting Soto, I'd be like, what a great deadline for them.
Like they could have just gotten Josh Bell, and I think they would have had a good deadline.
Yes,
Really.
yes. Um, they're legit, right?
Yeah. I think the Padres are legit. I mean, they got a little bit pantsed by the Dodgers this weekend because the Dodgers are the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Padres are not a good team. I think they need to come together as a unit a little bit more. I think they're still going through the shell shock of the deadline itself. A lot of movement in that clubhouse. A lot of, Luke Voigt's gone. I feel like he was probably a presence in that clubhouse. Eric Hosmer's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're in a little bit of flux right now, but they will settle in. But a lot of teams, I think, did really well at the deadline in general.
I'm curious what you think about the Soto deal because it really was like the first, I don't know what the best way of putting it is. I guess mega deal in baseball like this where there was a guy with this much control and this much youth. Is this a one-time thing or can you see this sort of thing starting to happen more in baseball? Because my God, as a fan, was that ever fun to watch it all unfold?
It was definitely fun to watch unfold, but I actually kind of hope it doesn't happen too often from here on in. I think it's really bad for the Nationals, even if the package is good and turns out because they got a lot of pieces
Yeah,
there,
they
Mackenzie
did.
Gore,
Yes.
CJ Abrams. Even if the package pans out and turns out to be good, that's not what you want out of a baseball team in general. You want a baseball team to embrace their star and give their star what they want and build around that star. And when you have Ted Williams on your team, you decide to trade him for a lot of pieces. Your mindset can be in one place and maybe a good-hearted place, but at the same time, Nats fans are never going to trust their front office again, even after they got the World Series less than 3 years ago. And I think that's just it's shocking to see. And I can't think of another trade that's like the Juan Soto trade, even like in off-season deals, because I feel like off-season deals tend to be a little bit bigger because there's more time to
Mm-hmm.
mull over and find a good fit. This deal I took everybody by storm, but I generally hope that something like this doesn't happen again.
I mean, obviously, the Nationals front office framed this like they almost had zero choice.
Yeah.
Do you feel that's the case?
No, because the deal that was offered to Soto that he rejected at the end was for, I believe, 450 million and 15 years. And the price was good. It was the years that was the
Mm-hmm.
problem, the annual value of the deal. So the Nationals had the capital to pay Juan Soto, but they wanted to spread it as thin as possible. And I think that's the large issue here. They're acting like they were handcuffed and couldn't afford him when in fact they had the money to afford him and just wanted to get the maximum value out of the deal. Whereas you can't really squeeze a player like Juan Soto. He wants to be the highest paid player in baseball, and he will be. Somebody will
Yeah.
pay him. And it might be the Padres, it might be somebody else.
2.5 years just feels like such a long time to be able to negotiate to
That's
back
three
out after
postseason
that.
runs. That's three
Yeah,
playoff runs. It's crazy.
it is absolutely insane. When you look at the Nationals after this whole thing has gone down, obviously you touched on it, right? Like they did get some really good pieces coming back the other way. Do you think that this speeds up their rebuild at all? It doesn't, right? Like losing Juan Soto, there's no way of.
I think they were always due for a long rebuild, right? And I think
Yeah.
that maybe this accelerates some aspects of it. But the fact of the matter is that the Phillies went all in on their capital and traded to get more pieces. The Braves are a powerhouse with locked up pieces for the next 8 years. The Mets are spending money now and investing in a sustainable farm system. I'm not really sure what the Marlins are doing. They're kind of in flux. But the point is, there's going to be three Titans in the NL East for at least the next 4 to 5 years. So I think the Nationals kind of always knew that their window was going to come after that, if at all. So I guess they weren't focused on accelerating it and rather just stockpiling as much prospect capital as
Right.
possible. And if that was your goal, you've achieved it. But the cost was the entire trust of your fan base and losing a potentially generational superstar.
Rebuilds are so interesting how it's such a roll of the dice how they turn out. I mean, let's face it, and I haven't heard anyone in the offseason that was like, you know what, Baltimore, wait for it,
Yeah.
right?
And the
And
the
now you're
amount of
watching.
people like that were hinting at the Tigers maybe making a surprise run,
Yes.
and they've absolutely flamed out. Like rebuilds are such a roll of the dice, like you said.
like the Orioles blow my mind.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, as a Jays fan, as it is, right? This AL East is already a meat grinder. We don't need five of them, but
Yeah, we should
okay.
talk some Jays, huh?
Yeah, let's talk some Blue Jays here and the American League deadline moves. I know Jays fans watched the Yankees, the Astros, the Twins truly bolster their lineups, right? Like when you see those teams, Adamontes, Anamali, right, going to the Yanks and Twins, Mancini,
Yep.
going to the Astros, and then you look at what the Jays' approach was, which was definitely less flashy and more tempered, to say the least. Did they do enough? Like everyone listening really wants to know is should Blue Jays fans be panicking? Like 2 losses to the Orioles has most of us running around screaming the sky is falling. Talk us off the ledge, Jack.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing to remember is that the Blue Jays probably had the best offseason of a lot of teams. I'm not sure that it's the definitive best, but they were up there in the upper echelon in terms of the things they did. I really liked the Berrios extension. Obviously, it's been a tough season, but I think that cost value extension for what he did last season was very, very good. Um, they had holes to address. The main one was the bullpen, and they did add pieces. I like Zach Pop a lot. I got to see him a lot on the Marlins. I thought he's pretty good. Mitch White, I think, is a great pickup for you guys. I'm still not sure why the Dodgers traded him. It does not make a lot of sense to me, but I think the Jays are a big winner there as well. And then, you got Whit Merrifield on the cheap, and we know how good he can be. I think the Royals waited way too long to trade him. So I think the Blue Jays, for as little as they did, they picked their spots pretty well. And this is a very good roster to begin with. This is a roster that we pretty much all picked to win the AL East in the preseason. Obviously, things are going well, but not to that degree so far. But I think it's safe to say that the Blue Jays were going to make the playoffs with or without these deadline moves. It's just, yes, they could have improved to a vaster degree, but there's still a lot to like about this team.
It feels like the sentiment amongst Jays fans is they should have done more. It's not even that us fans are like upset with what happened at the deadline. It just felt like maybe a depth starter or a bigger piece in the bullpen would have been nice. And we're gonna jump ahead here. I know I kind of touched this when we were talking topics, but the Blue Jays front office have kind of chose to build this bullpen in a little bit different way than a lot of organizations have built their bullpen, right? Like there's not a lot of velo, there's not a lot of swing and miss, especially if you just remove Jordan Romano from the equation.
Right.
In your opinion, is this a mistake? Like, do they need big arms to compete in the playoffs?
So one, yes, I agree that like if you're in the playoffs, like you can have a form because the Jays play great defense, in my opinion. You have gold platinum glover Matt Chapman at third base. You have a solid outfield out there. Um, But when you're in the playoffs, you don't want to see a ball in play. You want to see a strikeout because
Yeah.
everything is already as tense as it could possibly be. And that's why, as a Mets fan, I feel very, very lucky to have Edwin Diaz back there because I know if we can just get it to the ninth inning, we'll have the game won. Not having a strikeout heavy pitcher, especially at the top of the food chain, is discouraging. But at the same time, the Blue Jays do a really good job in getting a lot of guys with different arm slots and different arsenals. Like Adam Simber in the middle of all of this is very, very good as your setup man. I thought David Phelps was a great pickup, and he's having a fantastic
Yeah,
season.
isn't he?
And there are guys that will step up and there are guys that will step down. I think Anthony Bass is a great pickup for you guys. He's been awesome for the Marlins this season. I think he can step up in a huge way, and he has been a strikeout guy in the past. But with all that being said, getting like, and it's the same thing for the Mets. Honestly, I thought they had a good deadline, but if the Mets or the Jays just got David Robertson or
Mm-hmm.
Gregory Soto or somebody to be the eighth inning guy that can mow down a couple hitters and get it to the main man in the ninth, I think that would complete the deadline for both of them. I think both the teams are good and both the teams did good things at the deadline, but they were probably one bullpen piece away from having like an A+ deadline.
While we're talking bullpen pieces and just closers in general, I mean, I've watched baseball since I can remember, and what is happening with these closers entrances, like my god, Edwin Diaz, I can't stop watching it. It is incredible, the entrance. And then even last night watching the Jays and the Orioles and then watching
Felix
Batista come out
Bautista, yeah.
to the Omar whistle, and I was just like, this is so cool and has lacked from baseball. What an amazing find? Like,
Yeah.
who decided to do this? I just love it. Like, you've got to love it as a Mets fan, right?
I mean, I'm so glad that it's getting national attention because when he first did the trumpets and for the Mets, at least in 2021, I couldn't stop watching the first clip that SNY showed of it. And SNY does a great job of not going to commercial and letting the
Yes.
moment breathe and letting it build. And I think that, it doesn't. There's a lot of great songs to choose from. Like we always hear, like, what would be your walkout song if you were a hitter or a pitcher? There's so many good things to choose from, and a lot of guys have these great entrances that either don't get shown because of commercial or don't get highlighted because it's not boasted by the stadium, like the Orioles did last night at Camden Yards with those flashing lights.
Yeah.
It's so easy to make a moment, and by making that moment, make a character out of one of your players. And that's the whole problem with baseball marketing in general. We don't make characters enough. We don't give personality. We don't let it breathe enough. So I think that something as simple as extending the trumpet intro and letting it be shown over commercial for like 30 seconds extra. That got 6 million views on Twitter and it
Yeah.
went completely global. And Pat McAfee was talking about it on the show, and now he's a Mets fan because of that one clip alone. It's as simple as that. And I think more teams can easily embrace this. So I'm glad that the Orioles did that, in all honesty.
Yeah, no, it's great. And again, like, this is an opportunity they could have taken decades ago.
Yeah,
And it's funny that it took this long, but good on him. Every once in a while, right? Even a broken clock is right twice.
absolutely.
So let's talk Kevin Gosman real quick here, because man, he is putting up a hell of a season. I mean, an ERA under 3 and a FIP under 2. He's really flowing under the radar though
Yeah.
when it comes to the rest of MLB. No All-Star appearance. Not that I feel like he was snubbed because he's had a great, his best month has been this month after the All-Star break. He could even get some Cy Young votes.
Yeah.
Where do you rank Gosman in the realm of the American League pitcher hierarchy?
So for definitely top tier. I want to say that first of all. This is another great thing that the Jays did in the offseason, which is again, remember if you're disappointed with the deadline, remember what they did in the offseason. The big thing for me that will solidify my belief in Gosman, because I do think that he should be your game one starter in the playoffs. I don't think it should be Manoah. No offense to Manoah. I think,
No,
he's a young
interesting. I
kid.
like it.
Let
Yeah.
the kid eat in game two. That's beside the point. The big thing for me was I'm looking at last year's game logs when he was with the Giants. After his June 23rd start in Anaheim, where he went 7 innings, 1 earned run, his ERA was 1.49 on the season. To that point, he had thrown about 100 innings. The latter 100 innings of his season were the most he had pitched in a few years, and then you kind of started to see the fatigue set in, and the results came back a little bit. He came back down to earth. So his ERA in the second half landed him at 2.81, which is still a really good number on the year. I need Gosman to finish strong and be a big September pitcher for the Blue Jays and not show that fatigue and show that he can be an ace throughout the entire year. And this year was interesting because he kind of had some hitches in, I think, May or June, somewhere in the
Mm-hmm.
middle there. And then now he's sorted rounded out and is returning to that form. So if he can find it in the last 2 months and finish strong, unlike the way he did last year, I think that's going to give one, Jays fans a lot of comfort, and two, give him the national attention that he deserves. A lot of that national attention has gone to Alek Manoah, and fair, because he's had a fantastic season and he
Yeah.
is a character for the Jays. Whereas Gosman, he's 31 years old. He's more of a vet. He's the one that got the big contract, but he is the one that should be getting that game one ball. So I'm really interested to see how he finishes out the year, because I think that will determine how he is voted upon in Cy Young voting and whether or not he's considered an all-star snub in the future. I personally think he was. And I think it's going to be really interesting because as Blue Jays fans, you're going to have a dynamic 1-2, and there is going to be a decision to be made as who is going to be the ace of that staff. In my mind, it's still Gosman just because of the experience he has, but he needs to finish strong is the general notion.
So, in your opinion, if he does finish strong, is he a legit ace? Does he get
I
that title?
definitely believe so. When I think of legit aces of the American League, Robbie Ray comes to mind, Kevin Gosman comes to mind, Garrett Cole comes to mind. These are the names that usually pop into my head first. So in terms of American League, yes, I think the competition gets a little bit more fierce when you do MLB as a whole. But when you're looking at that playoff field of those 6 teams, I think you have one of the better aces in that bunch for sure.
So when it comes to fans, sometimes we get tunnel vision. I don't need to tell you, you're in Mets Nation
Oh
there,
yeah,
so
no, I know.
yeah, it's very easy to lose perspective. So I would love to hear your thought just on the team of the Toronto Blue Jays in general. What are your thoughts on this team?
Well, first and foremost, they are a very good team. Let's just say that outright. I think that there is a certain trouble that comes with being the off-season winner. When you make the splashy moves and you get the guys you want and you make great trades, and everyone is expecting you to be very, very good. We've seen this with the Padres in the past where they won the offseason and then completely floundered in the regular season. And I think that the Jays have gotten an unfair shake because they've never really been bad this season, but at some
Mm-hmm.
points, maybe they had a couple tough losses or a couple tough stretches, and people have written them off a little bit. They had a manager fire this season. They've been in a lot of flux. They've made a lot of trades. They've had up and down seasons. Matt Chapman is turning in a great season now after starting pretty slow.
Mm-hmm.
It's been kind of, I will say, a weird year, but because of the talent on this roster, it hasn't mattered because the team is still very good. And no one's going to care about your slow start or your injuries or the trade flux or anything like that if you show up in the postseason. That's the thing that the Jays need to do. They need to at least win their wild card series for me to be convinced that this can be a yearly powerhouse tank of a team. I am hoping that they end up playing the Rays because I think that would be a very proving matchup
Oof.
for the Blue Jays. The
Mm-hmm.
Rays have been a thorn in their side for a while. I
Oh, I
don't know the
hate that
exact head to
matchup,
head,
but yeah.
but I think it would be the ultimate satisfying thing for Blue Jays if they were able to take out the Rays in the first round, probably play another AL East team in the second round as well. So I think that overall, this team is very, very good. I think now they've gone from overly recognized to kind of slept on because they're not really a story anymore. The Mariners are a story, the Orioles are a story, the Yankees were a story earlier in the year when they were on that historic run. The Blue Jays have kind of faded back into the background, but I think that could be very, very good for them.
I'm curious from an outside perspective what your thought was on the manager firing and the Blue Jays moving on mid-season from Charlie Montoyo.
Yeah, I think it came too late. Like I never had a huge problem with Montoyo. I follow a lot of Blue Jays people on Twitter, and I would always be privy of the knowledge when he made a questionable move or had a questionable quote. I know that he was pretty beloved by players as a character, as a person. But the fire Montoyo notion has kind of been ongoing since like 2020, if I remember correctly. So I think the Blue Jays need to go and get their guy in this offseason. Whether it ends up being Schneider is a whole nother discussion. But I think the Mets waited too long to fire their manager in 2021. I was wrong about that. I wanted to give Rojas a chance. It turns out he was not the guy. And the Mets went out and got their guy, and they're better for it. So I think that whatever the Blue Jays decide to do, I don't ever love a midseason manager fire. I mean, it worked for the Phillies, so it's not always the wrong move, but I think that it's just so risky. And when the team was 46 and 42 when they fired Montoya, which is not a bad record, but it's not where the Blue Jays should have been. Now they're more where they should be. They're 10 games over 500. They're in second place. I don't think it was solely because of firing Montoya, but if it's the catalyst that the team thinks that they need, then that's the decision that they made.
So very curious what you think. I know you just mentioned they need to go out and get their guy with this whole Schneider regime, and I mean it's the same coaching staff, right?
Right.
Like, what do the Jays need to do for him to be the guy? Like, or do you think there's anything? Like, I guess if they go to the ALCS, how do they move anybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to see how coaches' reputation gets altered between, even months. Like last year, the talk of everybody was pitching coach Pete Walker, and how he worked miracles. And
Mm-hmm.
this year, I think he's kind of gotten a little bit of slack because of Berrios and Kikuchi and not performing up to snuff there. I think Schneider right now is pretty well regarded, but things could change very quickly if the Jays have a bad September or they lose in the first round. And his future with the Jays is completely hinged on how they do these next 3 months. If they go and they win a series and they make a run, he might come back. And I think a lot of fans would be okay with that. But it's always weird when a guy is thrust into that role because you rarely see them thrust into the role and then stick in the role. It's kind of just like a necessitative move that a lot of teams
Mm-hmm.
make. I do think Schneider has the capability to be a good manager, and he's been around the club, which is why I don't mind him being in that role. But at the same time, this is a decently young team. Bichette's 24, Kirk is 23, Vladdy's 23. Having a veteran presence at the helm would not be such a bad thing, in my opinion, especially a guy with a lot of experience. I was averse to it when the Mets hired Buck, and I was completely wrong about that, and I admit that every day. So I think a similar thing could benefit the Jays. I think the Blue Jays and the Mets are a very similar team in a lot of aspects.
If the Blue Jays make the playoffs but get eliminated in that wild card series, and you're at the helm. You're the Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins front office. Do you move on from John Schneider and go out and get start again?
Yes, because in my opinion, if you make the playoffs and you lose in the first round, the season was a failure. The Blue Jays should be a top four team in the American League, arguably top two. And the only way to prove that is to make it to the ALDS. And the goal shouldn't be make it to the ALDS, obviously. The goal should be win a World Series, but you want to make sustainable progress every year. Last year, they came one win shy of making the playoffs. Okay, the logical next step, let's make the playoffs and let's win a series. Logical next step after that, let's win the World Series. Let's continually build up from where we were last season. And you can't have a season where you make negative progress. So the absolute doomsday is that the Blue Jays somehow don't make the playoffs out of this very thick AL race. I think they will. I think they're pretty much a lock to do so, in my opinion. But the next step is proving that you can hang with these Titan AL teams, the two at the top, obviously being the Yankees and the Astros. But there are other great teams in the middle of the pack with you that are trying to prove the exact same thing. So if they come out on top of the food chain over you, the season's a failure regardless of who is at the helm and how many games they won during the regular season.
So let's talk the playoffs. Let's get your crystal ball out here, Jack, and tell us what you think. Is a top three of Manoah, Gosman, and Berrios enough come the playoffs? And I know Berrios has been a little bit of an enigma this year because he was one of the most consistent pitchers in baseball until this year, and now he's been consistently inconsistent. Sometimes he's been unbelievable, and then sometimes you're like, I'd rather have Yusei Kikuchi on the mound, which is really scary, right? So when you look at those three, how do you think they match up against the top three of, let's say, the Yankees or the Astros?
It's so interesting, the Berrios aspect of it all, because I remember his September from last year where every single time he gave you guys 6 innings, every single start was a quality start. He gave the team a chance to win every single outing, and this year, like you said, it's been so inconsistent. I think that your 1 and 2 give you a really good shot of at least winning one game. And in a lot of hypothetical scenarios, if the Blue Jays win their wild card series, they're going to be starting on the road for the remainder of their postseason run. Those are two guys you want in those first two road games against tough teams like the Astros and the Yankees. But I don't know about Berrios. I really don't know. I think that the Jays probably didn't have the capital to go out and get somebody at the deadline, starter wise, because of how high those price tags were. But at the same time, your postseason life is really hingent on him right now. You don't have Stripling right now because he's injured. And also Ross Stripling is not really a name that I'd want taking my game three ball. I want it to be Berrios, but I also want him to be better. That being said, there are a lot of holes in a lot of other top threes in AL teams. I think that the Yankees have a question mark with Montas right now. He's got to turn things around a little bit. Cole, we saw him in Boston last year. Yankees fans say that he was injured. Regardless of that, the Rays, we never really know what they're doing with their rotation. So it's not like this is a problem exclusive to the Blue Jays. The problem is that the team that it doesn't really affect at all is the Astros, because the Astros have such a deep rotation and such a deep bullpen and such a deep everything that they pretty much outnumber every other team, in my opinion. So for the Jays, if it comes down to facing one of those top two teams, the formula is you have to win Manoah's game and you have to win Gosman's game. And I do think they'll give you a chance to win. But if you lose one or either of those games, it's pretty much a death sentence for the Blue Jays.
So let's talk long-term Jose Berrios a little bit here, because I
Yeah.
know it's really easy for Jays fans to look at this extension, see how he's performing right now, and maybe panic a little bit. I really like Jose Berrios, and I truly think he's just going to figure it out. Even if it's not this season, I still think
Yeah.
he's going to figure it out. When you look at it from an outside perspective, what do you think of Jose Berrios?
So I see the home run ball immediately, and that's a cause for concern, but also a cause of relief for me because that is an anomaly, and I think that can come back down to earth. He leads the AL right now with 24 home runs allowed, 68 earned runs total. I saw what he did last year in the home stretch. I saw what he did playing for a team that was trying to compete and make it to the playoffs. I saw what he did under the spotlight, and I think he did a very, very good job. He's in a different market now. Minnesota compared to Toronto, that stadium gets way louder. There's way more fans. There's way more expectations with this team, in my opinion. So I think he's probably feeling the pressure of it a little bit. Obviously, the first year is always tough for everybody. The case that I always go back to is Edwin Diaz. It's completely different from a reliever to a starter, but at the same time, Edwin Diaz probably single-handedly prevented the Mets from making the playoffs in 2019. And 3 years later, he's turned into arguably the best closer in baseball. So there's no reason to suggest that Berrios will be the exact same today as he will be in 7 years down the line for the Blue Jays. I still think it's a great extension. I still think in terms of cost efficiency and what they saw from him, getting him on that deal was a steal at the time, and it still can be a steal. But Berrios, one, needs to show up in later years, and two, no one will care as much about this poor performance in 2022 if Berrios can show up in the playoffs and be a guy for the Blue Jays.
100%, especially if you look back on 2021 and his struggles in July when he first became a Blue Jay and how he managed to find it and really put in 6 weeks that,
Yep.
I mean, without Jose Berrios last year, everyone talks about how the Jays were only one win off of the playoffs, but without Berrios, it's a lot further
Yeah,
back than that.
you don't get that close.
No. All right, one last Blue Jays question here before we move on. I know we talked about it off the top. You just have this knack of kind of pinpointing players with value that maybe most fans missed. So in your opinion, when you look at this Blue Jays roster, who's the most underrated Blue Jay in 2022?
Oh, good question. That's a really good question. I think that Santiago Espinal is very valuable. I know that his offensive stats aren't quite there right now, but I do think he's a very valuable piece to a team. You know, I love my guy Rymel. He's absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. He stole my heart. That's a really good question. I think down the stretch, I think Lourdes might be a really big piece for them. I think that he's always the one that kind of gets forgotten when you talk about the meat of the Blue Jays lineup. You talk about Vladdy, you talk about Teoscar, you talk about Kirk and even, Matt Chapman's having a great second half so far.
Yeah.
Lourdes is kind of always the one that gets a little bit left in the dust for me. And I like him
Just
because
quietly hitting 310.
that's what I'm saying. He's quietly hitting over 300, and like hitting over 300 is a big deal now. It doesn't happen a lot anymore. Um, and I think he's just been consistently good. He played 141 games last year for the Blue Jays, for a team that was, fighting and scratching and clawing to try and make a playoff spot. And he's always been this good. He's a career 119 OPS plus guy, always has been above league average in OPS plus, hasn't always taken the field consistently until last year. And this year he's already played in 100 games. He's a big piece for them in the middle of their lineup going forward. We always hear about the highly touted Blue Jays offense, even though we spent a lot of this episode talking about the pitching. And I think that he's such a huge piece of it. And he gets forgotten because he's not one of these home run mashers. And that's perfectly fine because he plays solid, sound defense. He has 26 doubles, which is second on the team. And like I said before, he's batting over 300 with a 122 OPS plus. I think that he won't ever get the love that he probably deserves. But that's okay, because when you are a titan of a team and you're trying to be top 4, top 3, top 2 in your league, you need guys like this in the middle of the lineup that necessarily don't get the love that they probably deserve, but are integral pieces of your lineup nonetheless.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
I love that answer. And really, if you're just going to make a list of guys that you're getting the most value for that's being paid $4 million a year, he's got to be right close to the top.
Wow, he's only getting paid $4 million? That's crazy. It's so good.
Those international free agents, right? Okay, let's move on here, and we're gonna take a little bit look into the future here. So I know that it's expected probably 2024 that RoboUmps become a reality, even if it's not 2024. The writing's on the wall; it's going to happen. And one thing that I haven't really heard talked about is how this is going to affect catchers who. I guess my question for you here, Jack, is there a catcher or a few catchers in the league who are basically big leaguers because they're so good at framing, and will these guys lose their jobs?
I think the majority of them have their jobs because they're good defensively, and that brings such value to a team. I mean, defensive value for a catcher goes beyond throwing guys out on the bases. It's pitch framing, it's pitch calling, it's maintaining a good relationship with your pitcher and having them prefer to throw to you. I think Kirk is one of the rare cases where a catcher absolutely rakes, and that is his main value. I don't think Kirk's a bad catcher by any means, but his main value is his offensive production. And I think the league is going to change a lot, and it kind of bums me out because I know that we want the catcher position to be more offensively productive, but at the same time, like, not having a guy back there, not having a human being call the game will always be strange to me, regardless of if it is better for the sport and better for the players. And at the same time, I was a catcher and I spent a year learning how to pitch frame and do it correctly. And it is a fine art. And I know that it's considered stealing strikes and even cheating to some people. But at the same time, it is a main integral part of the game and it's involved in pretty much every pitch that's close to the zone. And I think that, it's a talent that is getting removed from the game. And, we want to help pitchers as little as we can because we love offense. But at the same time, it's always going to bum me out. I know that robo umps are good for a lot of reasons, but it's always going to bum me out.
Major League Baseball is great at making rule changes that they don't really foresee the consequences of.
Yeah.
That, and I think you really nailed it on the head there with organizations are just going to lean more towards offensively minded catchers, right? Like we're going to see a major shift.
Yeah. And it's those guys aren't even necessarily that available. Like even if you look at the field right now, a lot of the guys that produce offensively are still good catchers. It's just that catchers are tough to come by. I think that in drafts, we're going to see a lot more catchers taken higher up. I think a lot more guys are going to switch to catching positions because it's going to become an easier position to play. So the layout of the future MLB roster construction will change along with this rule.
Speaking of rule changes, are there any in your head here that you would like to see implemented for 2023?
The one wish was the one that I got, and that was universal DH, and I think that was on everybody's wish list. I personally like the Manfred runner. I think that, last night with the Yankees-Mariners game is kind of an anomaly of it going 13 innings. I think that it adds a lot of excitement. I think a lot of sports have a rule similar to this or similar in a concept to wrap up the end of a game. So I think that, honestly, the pitch clock, I could take it or leave it, honestly. If it's working in the minor leagues, hell yeah, let's bring it up and implement it. But in terms of the main changes I wanted to see happen, it was one, the Manfred runner stays, and two, the DH comes. So I'm a happy camper right now.
I mean, we kind of touched on it. Listen, so pitch clock you just mentioned, and I know that I was reading that I think on average it's shaving 22 minutes a game off of these minor league games, which is substantial. That's a big amount.
Sure.
But honestly, far more than the length of the game, I think little things like the closer entrance is way more exciting to fans than just, I watched a baseball game in 2 hours and 20 minutes, right?
Right. There are different ways to refine the product that is baseball. And I think a lot of people are thinking of it in terms of pace of play and adding excitement to the game. And there is validity to those claims.
Of course.
At the same time, I'm not a huge basketball guy. I'm not a huge football guy. I watch and I follow along and I know the players. And the reason I know the players is because the sport has developed them as personalities and has put them in commercials and has made me know their name. And that itself has refined those products, those sports. Whereas MLB has focused on the other part that we mentioned before. So they can do both. And I think both work together in tandem and would help the sport tremendously. They're focusing on one side of the coin right now, and that's their prerogative. But I think in the future, if they can market their players more and do exactly what we talked about with those closer entrances, just little things like that, they start to add up and pile up and make your sport more entertaining as a whole.
Sure does. Jack, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and joining us here. We're going to throw to Adam now. I know he's got a bunch of listener questions that we need to get to. Otherwise, we'll get crap in our Discord and on our comments. So,
first, I just want to acknowledge your reference to the Manfred runner as opposed to calling it a ghost runner. So thank you for that. Anybody who's
I don't like ghost runner.
Anybody who's played ball in their backyard as a kid knows that's not a ghost runner.
Exactly. You get it. You understand.
Not my solution, but the idea that I like for extra innings in baseball, being a hockey fan, is to go to a shootout style home run derby. Maybe do like one extra inning of normal baseball, and then beyond that, let's just pitch to our own guys and see who stops hitting home runs first.
Entertainment wise, that's a great idea. And then you'll have people be like, oh, well, then more teams are going to add power hitters to the lineup. Blah, 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 blah. But like, it's all strategy. So like, it's fun. Why not?
Yeah.
It's cool.
I mean, they talked about having it as an option for the AllStar game, right? It never came down to it. But
and we almost got it. We were so close. 3-2.
All right. Let's talk Nate Pearson for a second. I know you've got a video on Nate Pearson. When is his breakout coming? I just want to know, is it possible for him to be that guy with the Blue Jays organization, or does he need a change of scenery?
Some guys are just cursed, man. I
Yeah.
really like. I think of Dom Smith on the Mets as like I think a guy that can still be really good, but probably just can't do it in New York. Needs to be somewhere else. I don't know if that's the case with Nate Pearson. He's had a lot of freak injuries and freak happenstances
Frick, he
in
had
his career.
mono. Like,
Yeah,
what?
of course he would. Why not? And from all the deep diving I did for my video on him, I had no reason to believe that he can't be successful. Maybe not as a starter, but this guy can be an absolutely electric reliever, which is, by the way, what the Jays could probably use in their eighth
Mm-hmm.
inning right now. I don't know when it's going to happen, and I don't know if it'll happen for him in Toronto. But Pearson is still an asset. I think teams would be foolish not to take a check on him if he does become available in trades or something like that. But he definitely bums me out a little bit. I want to see Pearson flourish because he does have so much raw talent. I just don't know when it's going to happen, man.
Health is such a frickin' question mark, eh? Like,
I
even
know.
to bring up another guy that just Julian Merriweather with this
I thought
Toronto
he
Blue
was going to
Jays
be
team.
a stud. What
Mm-hmm.
happened?
Buddy. Like, I mean, after watching the beginning of 2021 and what he did to the Yankees, and just, I mean, he had a .5 WAR in
I
like
know.
3 appearances.
It's
Like,
crazy. So
but
crazy.
no, can't stay healthy.
All right. Next one comes in from our Discord. Garth says, "Hey Jack, do you think Ross Atkins watched your Tapia video and decided it was time to kick Grichuk to the curb?"
I don't think he watched it, but I do think that they won that trade outright. I think
Yeah.
Gritchick is such an odd MLB player, and I think he's
Mr. April?
Mr. April, and he is a perfect Rocky in terms of the stats that they probably look at. And I think it took a while for Tapia to gain value. I was sweating a little bit in April when his numbers were really, really bad, and he's really turned a corner since.
We all were, bud.
I wish he would draw more walks. Obviously, I think that would just make him the complete player that we've all been envisioning, get that OPS plus to 100. But I think that Ross Atkins, if you did watch the video, I hope you enjoyed it.
All right, very good. Next one comes in from Tony Wonder. Says, "How do you come up with the ideas for your videos?"
Oh, good question. I spend a lot of time on Baseball Reference, for sure. I think that my favorite thing to do is a lot of commenters will remark that certain videos are part of the Jolly Olive cinematic universe, sort of like the MCU.
Right.
Whereas they'll see a name in one video that's from another video, and they'll go, "Oh, like did you do that on purpose?" And the answer is always yes. I try to always look at transaction pages and trades and the teams that these guys played on because those are the easiest ways to just go through numbers and be like, oh, that guy had a 120 OPS plus this year. What else did he do? Let's click here. Did he get traded for somebody interesting? Oh, he did. And those are the ways that the ideas just kind of come to me because there's no real way to be like, to look up, be like, what's an interesting MLB season? Because there's such a umbrella term for that
Mm-hmm.
you'll find so many things that are either already done or already played out and not really what I'm looking for in terms of my niche. So it's a lot of baseball reference perusing and going down webs and chains, and also just baseball savant rankings and finding which guys are good at one specific thing and exploring that. So in short, it's a lot of time spent on baseball websites and just clicking around and not finding anything for 2 hours and then suddenly finding something.
Very
I
cool.
love so much that you don't take suggestions. So like both Adam and I are stand-up comics is how we make our living. And like
Mm,
people love to come up and tell you a joke. You can use that in your act. It must
like
feel the same way
sure,
sometimes, eh? Where
yeah.
yeah.
And like when I first started out and yeah, I came into contact with Foolish Baseball Bailey, I one of the first things I asked him was like, why don't you take suggestions? And his the short answer was just that he comes up with it on his own and like that's the way that he prefers to do his videos. And it's not like a shitting on fans kind of thing where it's like I
No.
don't want your ideas. It's just, that's not my idea. And if you ever wanted to do it, I don't want to take that opportunity away from you.
Love it.
Very cool. Next one comes in from Tobias. Says, "Do you edit your own videos, and how long does it take to produce a single video?"
I do edit my own videos at a pretty rigorous pace because I have a lot of resources behind me, thankfully, thanks to Jomboy Media. The way that my schedule currently works, although it changed a little bit last week because of a trip to DC and then a weekend at the warehouse, the way it usually works is that I conceptualize over the weekend. I'll just hang out on my computer outside or while I'm watching TV and just do exactly what I said before, scroll around baseball reference, or I have a little idea list and I just decide what I'm going to write on Monday. Monday we do Shea Station, and then I write the video during the day at the office. So that's my favorite part of my job. Honestly, I get to write for a living, which is very, very cool. Usually that night or the next morning, I'll record it. I'll send it to somebody else who will clean the audio for me and send it back to me. And then the rest of that day is collecting all the footage that I need. And that's what's really helpful for anyone who's looking to start making videos. Always write a script, because then you know exactly what you need clip wise. I collect my stats beforehand so I can easily copy and paste them into the video. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is all the editing process. It's cutting up the audio, cutting up the footage, making sure that you have a flashy intro, knowing what you need to do for an ad sponsor. And it's all a lot easier said than done, for sure. And I'm thankful to have a lot of people behind me that help me out in this process. But I think the greatest thing about my job with Jomboy Media is that they know that I kind of want it to be my thing and keep my own hands on it, and not infiltrate too much with my creative process. And I think that's why the product has improved so much in the past year. We've had a really good year on the channel, and that's because there's not a lot of people just trying to tamper with it. So if you are an aspiring content creator, make it your own. It's good to get help in places that you need to save time, or if it's something that you're just generally not good at. I suck at sound editing, so I have a sound guy now, and I'm very thankful for him. But at the same time, make it your own. Make sure it's your creative vision, and keep it that way.
I can relate to the audio editing.
Yeah, I'm just not a natural at it, and some people like it, and I'll never understand those people. But
Yeah.
the world needs weirdos, so
we need sound editors. You freaks,
Definitely.
you absolute freaks.
All right, two more. Next one's from Maggie Lizer. You mentioned the Jomboy Media there, so she says, "How did your connection with Jomboy Media come about? Did you contact them and apply for an opening, or did someone from them reach out to you and say, hey, we like your stuff? And then how has that changed things for you?"
Yeah, so there was no application process when I first got hired. I had DM'd Jomboy, I think 4 months into my channel, and just said, hey, really appreciate everything you do. Love your breakdowns. They inspired me to make my own content. We had a nice little friendly exchange there. Some of my first videos ever were Mets breakdowns, which were not good, and I still think you can find them on my TikTok that I don't use anymore. But that was sort of how I got started in content, so I wanted to extend gratitude there. They had reached out to me because they had been scouting me for about 3 to 4 months, trying to see if they could fit me into their content network. They reached out and had me come to the Bronx office to meet everybody and just do a little tour and hang out. And I was hired that day. And I think it's very unique to me. And I always feel bad when people ask me, how did I get my in? Because the advice that I give is not really great, because I was kind of the guinea pig at Jomboy Media. I was really the first external creator that they brought in to do their own thing. So the contract was like half a page long and not formal at all, which I loved, because I was a little intimidated, and then I instantly was not. And since then, when they got to the new office and put out creator applications again, the process was much more formal. They knew exactly what they were looking for in terms of branching out to different sports and wanting people that were in New York and stuff like that. So I think, a lot of people tell me not to say this because, they want me to know that, you've earned all this, you've worked hard for it. But I do think it was just really good timing and a little bit of luck and being in the right place, geographically, and all those factors worked out, and that helped eclipse my channel to a new height.
Totally. Very cool. Okay. So since joining Jomboy Media, then how has this changed your video production, what you're doing, your lifestyle, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, having people behind me is awesome. Having people, really tell me what to improve on with the content, what to fix, what they like is always really helpful, because going in blind is always a little tough, putting something out there and not really knowing the reception that you're going to get. At the same time, though, as I mentioned before, they're very good about letting these videos still be my own. The script writing process is still all me. They don't tell me what to say. Only, putting ads on my videos is the main, correspondence there. It's been great because I have better resources in terms of a better mic and a better camera, and know what websites to use to download footage and all that stuff. But at the same time, they really let their creators be their own kind of person. You got hired for a reason. It's because we want you to continue what you're doing, just with better resources behind you and a higher scale. So I think that the trust that they've put in me has helped me become more confident in my video making and know that what I'm doing is good. So yeah, that's, I guess, the short answer to that.
Very cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
Okay, and the last question here comes from Steve Holt. Says, how long were you doing YouTube as a hobby before making it your full-time job or career?
Good question. I started YouTube actually, it'll be 2 years ago tomorrow, August 11th. So maybe that'll be the day that I'm not sure when this will come out, but I did it in the pandemic because I was a former playwright and nobody was publishing plays in the pandemic because nobody could go on a stage and act because there was a pandemic, obviously. So I had given up on that, but I still wanted to write something, and my second love was baseball. So I was like, okay, I'll just focus on that. I wrote for a couple sports websites. The treatment there wasn't fantastic, so I decided to just start making videos so I could independently own it. It was slow goings, definitely. The creators will always tell you the first 1,000 subscribers are the toughest to get because it's just an absolute grind and getting people to trust you and keep tuning in. But once I got past that, I knew that this could be more than just a hobby. It could be something of a career. And that was definitely not where my life was headed at that point. So things kind of changed on a dime. And then the dominoes just kept falling after that. I did MLB Game of the Week on YouTube, and then Jomboy reached out and I started working there. Then the podcast, and everything's just kind of evolved very, very quickly in under 2 years at this point. So I'd always say, don't ever start doing content creation to try and make money. Do it because you really enjoy the stuff that you're writing and creating and want to show people. And if success comes with that, then it's just an added bonus.
Totally. Very cool. Scott?
That's everything for me. Yeah.
All
Man.
right.
Honestly,
Ooh.
Jack, this was really cool having you on. We really appreciate your time, and hopefully sometime down the road we can have you back and talk some Mets and Blue Jays and all that good stuff.
World
Thank
Series
you.
Absolutely,
preview,
guys.
Mets and Blue
That's
Jays.
what I'm
World Series
saying.
preview.
Let's book it.
2015, that's what we should have got. That's what I was waiting
All
for.
right.
Yeah,
Sounds
guys,
good.
absolute pleasure. Thank you for the questions. I love that you guys have like a fan Discord and they got to ask some stuff too. That's very cool. You guys do a great job here.
Thanks, man. Right back at you. Enjoy your stuff. Until the next time.
Till the next
Cheers.
time.